Good evening and welcome to 6-1. A new report from the United Nations says climate change is already occurring on all continents and across all oceans, and warns that the world is ill prepared to cope with the consequences. The report, the latest in a series from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, identifies which parts of the world and which ecosystems are most vulnerable to global warming. It says the results will be adverse effects on food production, economic growth, human health and security, water resources and wildlife habitats.
Today's UN report was a shot in the arm for environmental groups here, such as those associated with the Stop Climate Chaos movement, who held a briefing in Dublin to explain the challenge. It is the first time that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has detailed the evidence that climate change is actually happening all over the world.
The one message that comes out very clearly is that the world has to adapt and the world has to mitigate. And the sooner we do that, the less the chances of some of the worst impacts of climate change being faced in different parts of the world.
For Europe, it warns of increased economic loss and people affected by flooding and extreme heat events. It says there will be impacts on health and well-being and crop production, as well as much more.
There are now big concerns about the biodiversity of the world, about the way in which species will not be able to cope with climate change because they can't migrate quick enough. Our trees, many of our Arctic alpine species, many of the species which like coldness, even in Ireland, species like salmon, species like the Arctic char. Those are the kind of things which are now going to be threatened by warming.
However, it is not all negative. The Green Party, in particular, sees many opportunities for Ireland.
The changes we need to make are actually going to be good for the country. Like having a good public transport system is a social gain. Having a good food system, getting us eating better, which helps tackle climate change, is better for our quality of lives. And having an industrial system that cuts out the waste from the very start is where our economic opportunity lies.
However, the aid agency Trócaire said the report reaffirms that the world's poor are suffering the worst effects of climate change, having contributed the least to global warming. And the poor are now totally reliant on rich countries in the West to take action. George Lee, RTE News.
Well, George Lee is with us now for more on all of this. George, we heard John Sweeney there from NUI Maynooth, and he wasn't putting a tooth in it, saying that the effects of climate change are profound and cannot be ignored.
Well, that's right, and this is the very first time that we got to the situation where the United Nations panel is saying, before when somebody asks the question, is that climate change when you get flooding or you get forest fires, people will say, well, we don't know, it's consistent with it. Now they're saying, yes, we can say it is climate change that's going on, and it's right across the world. And they're warning that if we don't take action now, if we don't reduce the emissions now and allow the global warming to increase, it is catastrophic as the century progresses. In the early part, maybe you can adapt to it. In the later part, it becomes very, very difficult. And they also say nobody in the world will be unaffected. This is going to affect us all, and we must take action now, is what they're saying.
We also heard there in your report the Green Party's Eamon Ryan accentuating the positive as you might expect. But this is a tricky one for us, is it not, given our agriculture-based emissions?
Well, it is indeed, because 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions, which are the devil in relation to climate change, 1/3 of them are coming from agriculture. And the plan in our agriculture sector and the government's plan is to increase the output of agriculture very, very strongly in the next couple of years. And the difficulty with that is that means extra greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to be forced by Europe to bring them down, and bring them down very sharply, very quickly. And so what we had this evening, for instance, we would have had comment from the two main farmers' organisations, the IFA. They said they would like to see a reshift and a refocus away from these, what they called the forecasts on what will happen in terms of climate change and the bad outcomes, and focus instead on the sustainability that communities can deliver in terms of food production. The dairy farmers, what they're saying this evening is that they're worried that we're going to be bounced into what they call disproportionate and programmes to reduce our emissions, which will be bad for us. So they really are very aware that they're caught in a situation where they need to defend what they see as being their opportunities to grow. But the government is going to come under enormous pressure from Europe and elsewhere to reduce our emissions. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how that develops in the years ahead, in the months ahead, actually.
Delicate balancing act. George, thank you.